From all of us here at the Retro Wrestling Rewind, and that includes Alex G, of course. He's not here. He's on another vacation somewhere in the Caribbean. He's going to be back next week with a Super 10 and some great stories that we probably won't be able to tell on the podcast. But from both of us and everyone here at the Retro Wrestling Rewind, we want to wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Festivus, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy Winter Solstice, whatever you celebrate. Thanks for celebrating the Retro Wrestling Rewind for the past year. Of course, we don't have a brand new episode this week. We'll be back next week with all new 52 weeks straight of new episodes. But this week, we have a best of interviews. Of course, this past year I sat down with the genius Lanny Poffo, the great Steve Regal. No, folks, not Lord Steven Regal, the real Steve Regal. They were both great. Of course, we're going to bookend the interviews. Starting out with a great interview from 1994. Yeah, that's right, folks. We're ending a decade, but we're going back to 1994. Smoky Mountain Wrestling, New Jack, and Jim Cornette. There's nothing, folks, that I can really say about it. Is enjoy this, and we're going to end it with two Dusty Rhodes promos. One from an empty arena with Vince McMahon back mid-70s, early 80s. And, of course, we can't end and start 2020 without the greatest promo ever. We're going to be having hard times. Hope, folks, in 2020 you have good times. And we'll talk to you next week. Once again, from everyone here at the Retro Wrestling Rewind, Happy New Year and enjoy.
What's this all about? You know, I've got to make an offer to New Jack and Mustafa right now, and also Uptown D'Lo Brown. How you doing? And I know that you got a lot on your mind this weekend, New Jack, the ghetto street fight with the Rock and Roll Express. I know you got a lot on your mind. If you want to, go ahead and vent that now. Get that out of the way, and then I got a few words to say to you.
Rock and Roll Express, finally, you done went to the ultimate. You decided that you could get mad enough to sign a match between me and Mustafa, a street fight. My kind of fight, you understand? You don't know nothing about that. We already proved that wrestling might not be one of our best things, but fighting, baby, we mastering that. And we done proved it. We got the straps. You don't. You and Ricky somewhere now crying the blues, calling the commissioner, crying because you said we cheated. Well, if we did, so what? You got drunk in Memphis, couldn't make it to the show, you blame that on us. So now you want to come up here and try to cause some more problems for us. Well, I'm going to tell you something, and I tell Jim Cornette, and I tell these rednecks, I don't need to rock and roll. I don't need nobody out here cheering for me, and most of all, partner, I don't need you.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's what you do need. That's what you do need, New Jack, and that's why I'm out here to make you this offer today, because of what you said about the rock and roll. You see, as bad as it pains me to say this, you guys have come closer to putting the Rock and Roll Express out of wrestling than any team that I've managed so far. And it pains me to say that because I wanted to be the one to take credit for it. But I tell you what, you guys have the ability to be the greatest tag team on the face of this planet. You guys have almost finished with the rock and roll, and I see unlimited potential in your future. You guys get in there, and you can do anything in that ring, but where you have a few shortcomings is where I can help out. Because you see, you guys aren't diplomatic, you aren't very tactful. You go in there, and instead of trying to negotiate and sign those contracts the right way and talk to people, you go in there and you steamroller. I've got the inside track on signing contracts. I've been dealing with these promoters, push these pencils around, telling people what to do for a long time now. And whereas you guys get in that ring and you pull a set of brass knuckles out, or you pull a blackjack out right in front of the referee and knock somebody out, I can teach you how to be more devious, because I've been doing that sneaky stuff for years. So what I'm saying to you is your ship has come in, a golden opportunity has taken place, and I'm going to make you an offer today unprecedented. I've managed 2 tag teams in the last 10 years, the Midnight Express and the Heavenly Bodies, and both of them have been the greatest tag team in the business at their time. Both of them been World Tag Team Champions, Smoky Mountain Champions. The list goes on and on. I am here prepared to make you an offer, order before midnight tonight, of a lifetime. I am prepared to sign the gangsters to an exclusive contract for me to manage you and take you straight to the top. I'll get those contracts signed the right way. I'll do the right kind of negotiations, and I'll teach you those little subtleties about being sneaky and devious that you haven't so far picked up on. In other words, what I'm saying to you is my guidance and my guiding hand, together with your natural ability, will be unstoppable. All you got to do is sign on a dotted line, and I'm going to shake your hand, and I'm going to say it's been a pleasure doing business with you.
Cornette, for 400 years, white folks got ships, went to Africa, stole my ancestors, brought them back here, chained in the bows of a slave ship for 400 years. Now this is 1994, not 1794. I don't need no white boy like you or these rednecks out here coming to me telling me what you can do for me. I got a college education and a criminal record, so I know how to make decisions. So let me tell you something. The gangsters are black-owned and black-operated, and I don't need no white boy telling me jack, punk.
Well, good. I always love talking about my business, and I'm one of the few guys in the last 10 to 15 years. There's been probably 150 guys in our business that have passed, at a young age. I mean, God, I just start Dusty Rhodes, Kurt Hennig, Adrian Adonis, go on down the line, Bobby Heenan. It's crazy, man. I'm only 68, and all those guys are gone. It's just kind of sad, but, it kind of tells you the lifestyle of a wrestler,
It's kind of sucks. I mean, we hear about young wrestlers, old wrestlers, good wrestlers, bad wrestlers, dying, at a young age. But we know you started wrestling in 1977, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you were trained by the great Wilbur Snyder. I mean, kind of talk about your first professional wrestling match. I mean, when you first got in the business. But, before we get into that, I always like to ask everyone, on interviews. Yeah, I was a professional wrestling fan growing up in the mid-'80s. When you were a little Steve Regal, was that a thing that you went to see? Were you a professional wrestling fan at a young age, or was it one of those things that, kind of, you got into as a teenager, as in college?
Actually, to be honest with you, I've always been an athlete. From 8 years of old, I played football, and I went to Indiana State on a scholarship and punted for Indiana State and had a tryout with the Redskins. But that's a side story. I started watching wrestling in Houston, Texas when I was a young kid with Pepper Gomez, and I just enjoyed Pepper's work, of course, and was a big fan. I was hooked, when I was in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and then when we moved up to Indianapolis, of course, I went to school with Mike and Cindy, Wilbur's kids, and the rest is history. But yeah, Wilbur was, and talk about somebody training you. He trained you good. He stretched you like a pretzel, man.
Yeah, I mean, kind of tell everybody how it was, that first match after, being trained by the great Wilbur Snyder. I mean, it was, like you said, being stretched out like a pretzel. I mean, it must have been surreal in your first match in your career.
Well, let me tell you, I definitely remember vividly my first match, and it happened when what I did when I started in the wrestling business. I'll give you the backstory. My brother-in-law, Mike Snyder, Wilbur's son, was hauling the ring and refereeing, and for the Indianapolis territory, Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur's territory, and Mike wanted to go on and wrestle, and he said, "Hey, do you want to take the ring over?" I said, "Yeah." So I did that, and then, of course, I said, "Well, how about I referee so I can make a few more bucks when I set the ring up?" Did that, and then I saw him started to wrestle. I said, "Well, heck, he's a little guy. He can get in there. I can too." So the rest is history, but he was my inspiration. I wouldn't have even thought about it. I would have hauled the ring until the rest of my life till I saw him get in it, because, the guys were big monsters back then, and it wasn't a light heavyweights milieu. You know what I mean?
Speaking of light heavyweights, I mean, we know that you made your prominence in the AWA. For people listening to the podcast, they're the big fans of the AWA. You won your first light heavyweight title against Rock and Roll Buck Zumhofe. I mean, you've been in the business for 7 years. I mean, how was it to win that light heavyweight title from Rock and Roll Buck Zumhofe?
Yeah, that was my first. And I had some tag belts along the way up until then. In Portland, Oregon, I was their heavyweight champion and tag team champion for a while in the early 80s. working for Don Owens, God bless his soul. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but if he is, he's over 100. But he was a great promoter. But yeah, I made my, for some reason, Vern and Greg, of course, Greg's a little guy, a smaller guy too. And, they wanted to, they would use me. You know what I mean? It's, you know how it is. You got to break in the business and be experienced and be a true professional before you get a break anywhere. Well, they gave me a break and made me the light heavyweight champion. And Buck Rock and Roll Zumoff, God bless him, he was over like $1 million in Minneapolis territory. And, wrestling him, we brought the house down many, many nights. But now later on, I find out he's in prison for being a child molester. I didn't know that about him, but we had some classic matches.
Yeah, I mean, some people, you never know. I mean, they put on this persona as being a clean-cut guy, and then, well, what they do behind the scenes, hey, you never know. But, you wrestle for the AWA. I mean, I grew up, I loved watching the AWA on ESPN. I mean, it brings back some great memories. But how was it working for Vern and Greg Gagne? I mean, traveling around with the AWA, back in the mid-'80s. I mean, must have been great.
Well, what was great about Vern and Greg, what they would do is we only worked 3 or 4 nights a week. They didn't run you every night, like when I worked for Vince for 90 days and quit because he like to kill me because of the travel. With Vern, you could have a life, you could have your family, you could come home, you might be gone 2 nights a week, because the other towns, we had a private plane, we flew back and forth on the same night. So it was really a first-class operation. And if you were a family guy and, wanted to be home, you could. And it was a great area for that because every other place you go, you're working, 10 times a week, twice on Saturday, every night, and you're in a different town. It's a really stressful life. It was, at least with working for Vern, you could get up in the morning, go to the gym and eat and have fun, and then go out Thursday, Friday, Saturday night and make your money. And it was a great thing. Yeah, it was a great territory.
So 1985 rolls around. And they put you in a tag team with Jimmy Garvin. I mean, Jimmy Garvin's a great wrestler. They put you in a program with the Road Warriors. They were the current AWA tag team champions. And they put you over. You were the AWA World Tag Team Champions. How did that feel being put over such a monstrous and a very popular team as the Road Warriors, and of course tagging with Jimmy Garvin?
Well, we became a great team, and they all came about. Hawk and Animal grew up as tough guys. I mean, they could beat the crap out of anybody. Especially Hawk. He was probably one of the toughest guys I ever met. And, but the good thing was we were friends, So in other words, if they wouldn't have liked us or wanted to wrestle us or do what they wanted them to do, it would have been a disaster. So the bottom line was they liked us. We had a great match, and we took the belts and we were off and running. It was a business decision. And that Jimmy, gorgeous Jimmy and I, myself, we were businessmen. I know Jimmy's retired. He was an airplane pilot, commercial airline pilot for many years after he got out of business. And I went on to my merry way because, after the age of 35 or possibly 40 in the wrestling business, if you're staying in it, your body's going to be shot. I can't believe some of these guys that are 60 and still doing it. But we had such a great time, and it just Jimmy and I, we were businessmen. We wanted to make money. Vern and Greg, hey, you guys want to do this? And well, how much you paying us? That's all we cared about. We didn't care about the ego, the belts, and all that stuff. We wanted to make money, and that's what we did. So
yeah, I mean, you won the belts from the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal. You were the AWA World Tag Team Champions. Great tag team with Jimmy Garvin. But as wrestling goes, 4 months later, you lost the tag team titles to Kurt Hennig and to a very young man by the name of Scott Hall. Fans listening to the show may know as Razor Ramon. He became kind of big in the WWF and WCW. And Kurt Hennig was an awesome wrestler. What was it like wrestling with Kurt and, of course, Scott Hall, knowing how he became so big and kind of what happened to him?
Well, what happened in that situation, it was, I believe it was mid-1985 or so thereabouts. And what was happening was Vince was already taking over the world, Jesse Ventura left, Hulk had left AWA. All the guys were migrating to Vince. And, I wasn't doing that at the time. I wanted to finish my run out. But, he was taking over the world, and it just they had to do something, and I. The reason we dropped the belts is because I knew there was no future in this. In other words, we needed to do that to create a situation, Hall and Hennig against Jimmy and I, going back and forth and taking the belts back and forth for a couple of years like you normally do in a promotion. But the bottom line was it became so screwed up because everybody left to the WWF. We never even got to do that because Curt Hennig is a super athlete, was a super athlete and a great performer. God bless him, died of a cocaine overdose at 45 or whatever it was. And, Scott Hall turned out to be a superstar, and Scott was a great guy. But when we worked with him at the time, he was so green. God, he'd hurt you. He'd hit you. He'd hurt you so bad. I'd say, Scott, loosen up, But he turned out to be a great wrestler, and I guess he's had his problems, too, throughout the years. But that revolves back around the fact that when you get to be 35, 40 years old, you got to, if you're a pro football player, pro basketball player, a baseball player, you're not going to be playing that sport at 40 years of age. I just couldn't understand these guys why they didn't save their money to at least get started in something else, because there's nobody that can make enough money in wrestling in a 10-year, 15-year career that you're going to do it for life. I mean, very few people can do that when they're paying their bills and raising their family. You can save a little, but I saved a little too, but it's hard to do. And so what are you going to do? I mean, you got to plan for the future. And, these guys just, I don't know, some of them just amazed me that they were still in the business.
Yeah, I don't understand it. Older wrestlers like Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, they're still doing it. And to be honest with you, from a outsider's perspective, a fan's perspective, it's just not the same. 1986 was a change for you. You headed down to Jim Crockett Promotions. That's the promotion that I grew up on. Back to Saturday shows on TBS and the Omni. You had a tour. You went around on the tour, wrestled a wrestler by the name of Downtown Denny Brown for the title. Finally, it culminated with a payoff. You won the title, Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. How was that, man? Finally winning that belt.
Well, what happened was, of course, like I say, I saw the handwriting on the wall. So what I did, I'm looking out for myself. I don't care about the promoters. I don't care about the referees. I care about my friends and my partners and stuff. But I wanted to go put a bankroll together so I could move back home to Indianapolis, have enough money to build a home and settle down there because that's where our family was. And my wife tried to talk me out of it. The last 2 years I did that when I went around to Charlotte and finally ended up with Vince. She said, just come home. I said, no, I got to get a bankroll together, baby, so we can have some cash. So that's when I did that. In 86, I went from Vern. I went down to Texas for a while. I went to North Carolina, and then finally went up to Vince. And within a 9-month period, and Vince paid very well. Everybody paid me very well. And I called Dusty when he was booking Crockett's promotions there and said, hey, can you use me for, 3 to 6 months? He said, yeah. And we made our deal, and the rest is history. And I'm glad I did that. I didn't want to, but my wife convinced me that you better get off the road now before you get permanently crippled. And she was right. And thank God I did it when I did. I wanted to stay a little longer, but at the time it was a appropriate decision, and I look back on it and say, thank God I did.
I always ask this question. When you look back at your career, is there somebody that you wish you could have wrestled, but never got the opportunity to wrestle? And the second question, kind of a part B to this question, is there somebody that you wrestled that you wish you hadn't wrestled?
Golly, there's nobody that I wrestled that I think I didn't want to wrestle. I was a businessman, and everybody was a true professional in my opinion. Every match I worked when I was hitting the big leagues. When you're starting in the game, there's people come through that probably don't make it. But after I made my bones and I was in the business, I didn't ever have a bad match with anybody or a grudge against anybody. And I loved working with everybody. I did Jesse Ventura. I was partners with Jesse Ventura. I was partners with Hulk Hogan. I was partners with Hanson Jimmy Valiant, with Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. I was with guys that, were superstars before I even started in the business. So I was very happy, and I made good money, and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, you've had a great career, and I've been sending you some texts, some snapshots of some of the stuff I've been watching on YouTube, folks. If you you've never seen a Steve Regal match, go out of your way, go on the Google machine, type in YouTube, type in Steve Regal, not Lord Steven Regal, Steve Regal, and you're going to, trust me, folks, you're not going to be disappointed. And I mean, since you had an illustrious career, a long career, I always love to know, are there any great stories from the road from a Jesse Ventura, an Adrian Adonis, a Hulk Hogan, a handsome Jimmy Valiant that you think folks at home would find amazing?
Um, there's a lot of stories, but it's not. Some of it would be R-rated. You know what I'm saying? A funny one would be Jesse and I when we. I guess everybody has done drugs in the wrestling business. I'm not talking out of line or anything, but when Quaaludes were popular, I don't know how old you are, but in the '80s, Quaaludes were a downer that they had numbers on them, 714, 714, Roar 714s, and they were a thing to make you sleep and relax, right? Well, they took them off the market because they were so good, but we were doing those, when we were on the road, so we could get some sleep, right? Because you're wired up from a match, and it's 3:00 in the morning. You're in the bar and say, "God, I got to get on the plane at 8:00. How am I going to go to sleep?" And so we started using them. But a funny story was Jesse and I were on the road. I think it was in Milwaukee, and we're at a bar, and we both took one, and then he passed out in a snowbank outside in Milwaukee while we were going back to the hotel, and Adrian Adonis was with us too, and he looked at me and said, "I'll just leave him there. We're going back to the hotel." I said, "No, I can't leave him there." So Adrian jumped in the cab and took off. I got Jess up out of the snowdrift and poured him in the cab and got him to the hotel. He said, and the next day he said, "Reed, you saved my life, man." He says, "You saved my life." It was just funny.
So yeah, I mean, working programs and wrestling the adorable one, Adrian Adonis. I mean, how was that? I mean, he was a great wrestler, and everyone listening to the podcast, knows that he was a great wrestler, but he was different. I mean, now they have characters just like him, but back in the 80s, he kind of stood out. So how was it wrestling Adrian Adonis?
He was different. Adrian was a great guy, and he was a good family man. He had a wife and kids, and God bless him. Died in a car wreck, I guess, with the twins from Canada. I forget their name, the Kelly boys. But Adrian was a great guy. I was with him everywhere I went. I either followed him or he followed me in the chain of things. It wasn't a defining thing that we were trying to do that, but we ended up in the same place. We ended up with Vern for the AWA in the late 70s, early 80s when we were both breaking in. We were in Atlanta together. We were in, Charlotte. Everywhere I went, Adrian would come through, and we were pretty good friends. And he loved to rib people, loved to make jokes on people, and he just was good at it. And, he'd scare me. I'd be walking around we had to do TV at the AWA. We had to do 8 to 5 one day every week, our TV interviews, which, and a wrestler doesn't want to get up at 8:00 in the morning, right? So we go there and we're doing the interviews. I'm half asleep, and I'm walking down the hallway, and Adrian jumps out from behind the door and gives me a chop in the chest. And I'd like to have a heart attack. He scared me to death. He liked to do stuff like that, yeah.
Before you retired, you wrestled for started a promotion called Windy City Wrestling, and you were their champion. I mean, you faced great wrestlers like Jumping Jim Bronsell, and a man who I was not a big fan of growing up, Colonel De Beers. How was it wrestling for Windy City Wrestling?
Yeah, it was. And, Mike, Sammy DeCero, I'm saying Mike. Sammy DeCero started that. Sammy was a good friend of mine. He was on the fringe of the wrestling business. He never got a break anywhere, but he did have some areas he worked, and he decided to promote there around the Chicago area. And he made a pretty good dent at the time. It's a situation where at that time, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. If he would have done that 10 years earlier, he'd have been a successful promotion. He was trying to buck everybody and make Chicago, an area, a hotbed. But that was when Vince was already doing. When I came home from 87 or 88, when I got off the road, I worked for Sammy till about, 91, 92, somewhere around there. And it was close to home. He was in Chicago, and I'd go up there, and he'd pay me well, fly me up and fly me back, and some other shows he did around the Illinois area. And he had pretty good crowds. He was doing okay, but, you just, at that point in time, you needed the TV station strong nationwide to make any money. And my hat's off to him. I have lost touch with him over the years. I don't know if he's still around or what he's doing, but I'm sure he's successful in whatever he chose. But he was a great promoter, great guy, paid well, and that's what I did out of Indianapolis my last 3 or 4 years in business. My wife said, "No, you can't go on the road." I said, "Well, I can go up to Chicago." She says, "Okay, I'll let you do that." So I went up and worked for him once or twice a month at a show, and helped him get it established. And Bruiser Brody came up there. He had some good talent coming in.
So you finally retired from professional wrestling. What does a Steve Regal, a man who's been a professional wrestler for many years, do in retirement? Can't go to a normal job, can you?
Well, what I did was I got out of wrestling, and like I say, we moved back to Indianapolis in '87, built a home. What you can do is you save your money and pay for your home so you don't have a mortgage. So that was a good thing, right? So we moved home, and I have 2 daughters. They're beautiful girls. They're in their early 40s now. But anyway, you got to make a choice. What are you going to do? You can't wrestle. You got enough money. You got some money saved. You bought your home, blah, blah, blah. But you still got to have cars. You got to have, utilities, food, 3 or 4 cars throughout the teen years with the girls, whatever, and pay for the home, right? So I went out and did what I thought I could do, and I had always had connections with the automobile business before I started wrestling. I had been a car salesman and did stuff like that, right? So I had some connections with people, and I know everybody out there. Everybody gets a job. They don't get the dream job by filling out a resume. It's somebody that says, hey, Steve, why don't you come do this or come do that? Well, that's what happened. I worked for a dealership for a while, and General Motors, their rep that comes there, I was working at an automobile auction, and he came down and said, hey, man, we want to represent our certified cars. I said, what's it involve? He said, well, you drive up and you fly up to Chicago for, Monday through Thursday and sell our off-lease cars. I said, yeah, sure. So I started working for General Motors in 94, 95, something like that, early 90s. And did that for a few years, and then from there it progressed into other little things. But it was in the automobile business where I made my money and retired just last July, down here in Pompano Beach, Florida, after we moved down here in '97.
So how does it feel to be actually retired? You're staying out of trouble, aren't you? Maybe hobbies? I don't know. What does Steve Regal do in actual retirement?
Well, what I did when I retired in July of last year, let's see, it's been over a year now. And for 6 months, yeah, you're right. I just laid around. I didn't do anything. I didn't, hardly do anything. And to be honest with you, I got bored. I didn't, I go work out and I did my thing, but, it gets boring not having something to go do. So instead of taking up golf or tennis, because my joints are too bad to do that, my wife plays tennis a lot. I just got a part-time job valeting cars at a deluxe restaurant right down the street. I can walk to work. It's 10 minutes down. I live by the beach in Pompano Beach, Florida, and there's 2 restaurants down there that have valet parking, and they pay you an hourly wage, and you make your tips. And I work, 20 to 25 hours a week, 4 nights a week, and it, gives me a little spending money, and thank God for Social Security. And Medicare.
Yeah, my wife grew up down in Boca Raton, and that's kind of where I went to school. So yeah, we know the Pompano Beach, Fort Lauderdale area. Really, really good. Spent some great years down there on the beach. It was a great place. Sorry that he had to move away to the big city of Atlanta. But if someone's listening to the podcast and they want to have the great Steve Regal on their show, maybe at their event or signing or whatever, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
Just give my email address, steveregal825@gmail.com. Fairly easy.
I am the genius, Lanny Poffo, David Fine, and Alex G. Their Retro Wrestling Rewind. Not quite as smart as me. Do you think I exaggerate? We'll have to wait and see. And now, if you are quite ready, the Retro Wrestling Rewind.
38 pounds in the black corner. From St. Louis,
Here comes Mr. Pro.
Andre the Giant.
Gonna get his one cent on the bruiser. Hulk Hogan.
Number 1, the greatest WWE champion of all time, and in many ways, the man who made the title what it is today, Bruno Sammartino.
His opponent weighing 236 pounds in the white corner. From Van Nuys, California.
You may know him as Leaping Lanny Poffo. You may know him as Randy Savage's younger brother. But today on the Retro Wrestling Rewind, we only know him as the genius, Lanny Poffo, welcome into the Retro Wrestling Rewind. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the show. But let's just kind of get right to the questions. The question that I always ask everybody when I sit down in person or on the phone: professional wrestling, was it something that you wanted to be growing up? Because I know your father was a promoter. Was it something that you grew up around, that you wanted to be, from a little kid to when you actually became a professional wrestler?
Well, I didn't want to become a welfare recipient. Okay, I wanted to do something with my life, and I knew I wasn't going to be a baseball player because I couldn't hit, run, throw, or field well enough to be one. I was good enough for Downers Grove, but not good enough for the world. So, and I wasn't even as good as my brother at baseball, and he wasn't good enough, evidently, because they have very, very high standards in Major League Baseball. So, wrestling always appealed to me, and I always thought that when wrestling was lousy, it was really lousy. But every once in a while, Buddy Rogers versus Pat O'Connor and Johnny Valentine and people like that always made me think that wrestling could be great.
And you started in the 70s in the NWA territories. I mean, where was the first promotion, first big promotion, besides, of course, your father's promotion, that you worked coming up, starting your career back in the early 70s?
Well, my father didn't have a promotion until 1979, and I was 1/3 owner with my brother and my father. So I was 33% owner of the company. So my father was a wrestler for all those years. And so then I started out in Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling in Kentucky. And then right around actually my birthday, I became 19 years old on December 28th, 1973. And I went to All South Wrestling. Mrs. Ann Gunkel, the widow of Ray Gunkel, Tom Ernesto was the booker. Are you familiar with these people?
Yes.
Okay, they had, when Ray Gunkel died, they had like a big mix-up, and everybody tried to do bad things to Ann Gunkel and get her out of the business. And she wouldn't have it. So I became, Jim Barnett bought into the NWA part of it. And naturally, you can't compete with him. He was just too good.
Yeah, it was back in the 70s. It was, back before the internet, back before, people, were, I guess, smarted up to professional wrestling. What was it like working, for your father in his promotion? Was it a good time?
I just told you I wasn't working for my father in a promotion. Okay. I was 1/3 promoter.
Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was watching the documentary, 350 Days. It was a great documentary. How did you become involved in that documentary? It was, about wrestling 350 days, in a year. How did you become, invested in on that documentary?
I'm friends with Evan Ginsberg, and he got me in there. So,
it was a great documentary. So,
I liked it too, but naturally, if a lot of people were in it but never saw the light of day because they didn't choose to put their, they went on the editing room floor. Used to be an expression, but now, of course, it's with software, so there is no editing room floor. So, in other words, I got chosen because some of my remarks were a little different than the other wrestlers.
Yeah, and speaking of that, you were known for your poems. Was that something that you had been, you've been great with poems all your life, or was this something that, someone came up with, when you were in the WWF that said, hey, let's do poems? Have you always been so great with poems?
Well, I was very, very lucky in my life to have met twice in my life Shel Silverstein. Okay. And I was, back in the days of the territories, I was trying to develop a different interview style than everybody else I was seeing. In those days, everybody, I'll boil you the bump. I'll get you. I'll put you in the casket. Yeah. That was like everybody was shouting. I hated it. So I was trying to do, even whether I was heel or babyface didn't matter. I was trying to speak like they do on ABC's Wide World of Sports, where they get legitimate athletes saying, well, I'm going to do my best, and that's the deal, So I always enjoyed light verse. I was good at creative writing. I always got good grades in that side of school. Very bad at math, though. I don't remember what they call you, right-brained or left-brained, but there's a lot of people that are not well-rounded. They're just good at one thing, and that's me. So when I went, do you remember a TV show called TNT, Tuesday Night Titans?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I saw that I was going to be booked on the show, and I realized that if I was boring, I wouldn't be invited back. And my goal was to get invited back and, prove that I wasn't boring. So I wrote a poem for that particular episode, and I read it to Vince on the show, and Vince says, that's great. From now on, you do a poem before every match. And that's when the poet laureate of the WWF was born. And I did a poem before every match. And some of the times I knew I wasn't getting much help because they would tell me 5 minutes before I went on the air, worldwide, that who I was going to wrestle. I have Jake Strongbow to thank for that. He was trying to box me into a corner. Definite abuse of power, and I did not cry when he died. I asked him, "Is there any way you can tell me, like, I get here at noon and I don't wrestle till 7. Is there any way you can tell me who I'm going to wrestle before that?" And he says, "Oh, I hate your gimmick." I said, "Okay." He hates my gimmick. I thought to myself, I didn't tell Randy, I didn't tell Vince, I didn't do any stooging. What I did is I bought a notebook because we didn't have laptops back then. I mean, I could do it all on my iPhone now. That'd be great. But I would write down every possible poem for every possible opponent I could have, and then a lot of generic ones for the times that I don't know who I'm going to wrestle and I don't have one. So that's how I managed to quell the sabotage of Jay Strongbow and his abuse of power.
And kind of speaking of that, kind of circling back around, I mean, in your long, glorious and illustrious career, who would you say your greatest opponent that you ever wrestled was? And kind of set up the situation. Where was it? Who was it? I would love to know.
Okay. Actually, as Leaping Lanny, the babyface, before I got in the WWF, like a year before, I wrestled Nick Bockwinkel on, and that's available on YouTube. And I considered Nick one of the greatest wrestlers ever. And I was smart enough to just listen to him. And then after the match, he says, "I don't mean to split hairs," but then he spoke to me for an hour on how I could improve. And then I just got to say that I love Nick Bockwinkel. What a nice man. And what a great credit to the business. And when he walked into a restaurant, he didn't just fit in. What he did was he outclassed everybody in the restaurants. The way he dressed, the way he carried himself, he always looked like a world champion. And phenomenal. Also, I was, when he was agent in the WWF, we were in France and Italy together for 2 weeks. And, I'm not really good at, being GQ, but he still had a crease in his pants on the last day of the tour, and I looked like I fell through a cat's ass. I was wearing my laundry, I looked bad, but that's the way it is when you're on an international tour. You know, I don't know how he did it, but he did great. And also, Terry Funk, I had a match with him in Madison Square Garden, and everybody congratulated me, but they should have congratulated him more, you know, because all I did was listen.
Yeah.
Also, you could get that match, Lanny Poffo versus Terry Funk, Lanny Poffo versus Nick Bockwinkel on YouTube. But believe it or not, the best match I ever had in the whole WWF was against Bob Orton Jr. in Toronto. And you can see that match on YouTube. And I just saw it recently, and I'm so proud of that match. And I must tell you, I did absolutely nothing in that match except listen to Bob Orton Jr. And what a fantastic talent. And it's amazing when people talk about great wrestlers, his name doesn't come up enough. And I really, you know, and of course, as a heel, as the genius, the best and most important match I've ever had in my life was against Hulk Hogan. And if there was one match I want to put in the time capsule, it would be that.
Yeah. I mean, what were your thoughts? I mean, at the time when Hulk Hogan wasn't losing that much, wasn't, you know, I mean, what were your thoughts on, you know, going over Hulk Hogan? I mean, like you said, it was a great match.
Well, yes, and I'll tell you what, I had been, as Leaping Lanny, you know, I had been spattered on the windshield of life. But I believed in something my father taught me. The only thing that counts is what the bank teller counts. So I was a very, very well-paid prostitute. And, you know, I couldn't make more money anywhere else. So I decided to, you know, do exactly what I was told every time. Well, Hulk Hogan liked my gimmick, and he thought it was hilarious. And, you know, he got with me and he wanted to do this. And I said, wow, that's great. I couldn't believe it. But he asked me if I had anything to add. I said, yeah. Instead of Mr. Perfect spitting on the belt, having to take the gum out of his mouth and stick it on the belt, it's more visual. Yeah, that's what I want to hear. What else you got? I said, instead of throwing me over the top rope, why don't you body slam me over the top rope? Because I can't do that. I don't want to hurt you. I said, Hulk, I'm a genius. No, I'm not a genius. I said, I am a gymnast. I'm gymnast. And as long as I have the top rope in my hands, I'm going to let go at 12 o'clock, not 11 o'clock, not, 1 o'clock. Because either one, you'll either hurt your knees or you'll hurt your back. And I decided, that a match of that caliber on NBC deserved the best that I had. And in that case, I would take the bump of the century. Of course, nowadays, when you look on TV, everybody can do that, and everybody takes a better bump than that. But in 1989, that was the bump of the century.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching it, on the, of course, the WWE Network. I mean, there's a lot of great matches of yours on the network. But if anybody wants to watch your YouTube against Nick Bockwinkel, Terry Funk, and Bob Orton Jr., it will be in our show notes at the bottom of this page. The person that you never faced, is there a person that whenever you is there a person that you would have liked to have faced that you have not faced in your past?
Well, I can't complain. I got to wrestle Lou Fez. I mean, that's pretty great. And I was a little afraid to work with him because he was so old. Well, I soon learned after getting wrist locked and taken over and boom, I said, wow, wait a minute. This guy's in fantastic condition. So he's better than me. So I just said Mr. Fez and everything, and he was always nice to me. Of course, he was friends with my dad. But I just listened, because when you're with a man of that caliber, you better listen. Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, I got to wrestle everybody. So I am not really wishing I got to face more people. I got to face enough people in the 21 years that I wrestled exclusively.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I just thought I would ask, but I know this is a question that you've probably been asked a lot. Any good stories from the road that you can share with our listeners?
Well, I know what you're trying to ask me about ribs. You know what I mean? The boys would rib each other on the road. And I promise you that I have never ribbed anybody at all, ever. I think ribs are ridiculous and I hate them. My dad, my father found out that I ribbed somebody, I don't even want to be around. Okay, that's pretty bad. That's like the ugly side of wrestling. And what happens is the ribs push comes to shove, and the next thing you know, I've heard of ribs. Are you familiar with Johnny Valentine and Jay York?
I am not. I mean, I
Okay,
know of them, but
you know who they are, though.
yes.
Okay, Johnny Valentine, who was one of my heroes growing up, is one of the greatest wrestlers ever. In fact, back in the kayfabe era, if there was any doubt about the authenticity of wrestling, Johnny Valentine could make you believe, he couldn't make you believe wrestling was real, but he could make you believe that he was real. Of course, how he did this is by beating his opponent like a drum, which is, you know, not a good thing to be doing. Okay. So anyway, Jay York has asthma, and he comes back from the ring, and he puts this asthma atomizer thing in his mouth. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you call that. What do you call that? An atomizer?
An inhaler?
I think it's an inhaler or an atomizer. I don't know what it is because I don't have asthma. But what he did, he put lighter fluid from his cigarette lighter in the atomizer. So when Jay York came back from the ring, he inhaled lighter fluid into his lungs, and it almost killed him. So he went to his car and got a gun and shot the suitcase of Johnny Valentine and then pointed it at Johnny Valentine. So
Yeah,
I don't think this is a good. I don't think this is a good rip. You know.
No.
And you know, he thought that he knew that Johnny Valentine was the one to do it because he had the rep. So this is, and then of course, Dynamite Kid used to cut people's pants and everything, and Jerry Lawler. There was a few people that didn't like him, and they would relieve their bowels in his crown when he came to WWF, right? And I'm sorry, these stories don't really turn me on. These are not the best stories. But you talk about on the road, road story. The worst thing about wrestling was the travel, and the best thing about wrestling was the travel. I got to go everywhere in the world. Didn't cost me a dime. People have to pay money to see what I've seen. Australia, New Zealand, all throughout Europe, everywhere in the United States and Canada. But on the other hand, it takes its toll on your body. And it's very dangerous. Your planes crash, cars get in wrecks, people die. 50,000 people a year. Why not me? I get lucky.
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of stuff that you've been doing outside of wrestling. I mean, you're a published. You've been published twice. Can you kind of tell everybody about that?
Okay, my website is geniuslannypopo.com. www.geniuslannypopo.com. I've written 2 books, and they're both out of print now because I sold them all, and don't want to go into more printing right now because it's all on Kindle now, and doing a lot on Kindle. So that's where the future of books are, on Kindle. So it's Limericks from the Heart and Lungs, and I wrote that, for my daughter to not smoke. And naturally, I believe in, now, right now, everybody's talking about vaping, which is also a ridiculous thing to be doing. So I'm proud of the fact that my daughter doesn't smoke or drink or do drugs. And she's given me 1.5 new grandsons. On December 4th, I'll be another grandfather. And I'm hoping that I can influence my grandsons also not to smoke, drink, or do drugs. And of course, vaping. You know, it's always going to be something. They come up with some new way to make money and addict our children. So,
Yeah.
so the first one is Wrestling with Brian, and the second one is Deliverance from the Heart and Lungs, and they're both available on Kindle. So on geniuslannypopper.com, you can check and see what I'm doing. I'm also on Cameo, which I just started because of Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He got me interested, and I'm doing Cameo, which means I make a video wishing you a happy birthday, and they pay me. So excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, all this information and the website and the Cameo link is going to be in our show notes at the bottom of the page. Just a question: you inducted your brother into the WWE Hall of Fame. How did that feel? I mean, after losing your brother, then he gets inducted to the Hall of Fame. I mean, how proud were you of your brother being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame?
Well, if I can tell you the whole story, you'll find that I was a little bit reluctant to do this because it was my brother's wishes not to be in the WWE Hall of Fame unless it was as a member of the family, the Popo family, Angelo, Randy, and Lanny. That was his wishes, and I had a big argument with my mother over it. Oh, you can't do that. That wasn't Randy's wishes. And I said, look, Randy got a lot of his wishes because he was the oldest. And I got a lot of my wishes negated because I was the youngest. But now I am 59 years of age. Actually, that's not true now. I am now going to be 65 in December. Okay? But what happened was, a year before Randy died, they put in all the Von Erichs into the Hall of Fame. And he got mad. He said, isn't that ridiculous? Lou Thesz and Johnny Valentine aren't in the Hall of Fame, but you've got Chris Von Erich and Mike Von Erich in the Hall of Fame. Now, he believed that the three people that deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, actually four people, were Fritz, of course, Kerry Von Erich, and David Von Erich, and Kevin Von Erich, that all those people deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But he thought it was absolutely ridiculous that Chris Von Erich and Mike Von Erich is not in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I mean, went in because of their last name instead of their first name. Mm-hmm. At a time when Johnny Valentine and Lou Thesz were not in the Hall of Fame. And he went on and on about that. And he said, if anybody wants me in the Hall of Fame, I'm not going in unless it's as a member of the Popo family, Angelo, Randy, and Lanny. And then he would joke with me, Lanny, you suck, and you're better than Chris Von Erich. You know, and then, you know, he also thought it was selfish of them to take their own lives while their mother was alive. You know, that was one of his points. You know, like, how can you kill yourself knowing what harm it's going to do to your mother who's got to watch that, you know? Yeah. People are selfish, though. So, but it was the drugs and everything. I mean, I'm not going to get into it. But then, right after my brother died, I get a call from John Laurinaitis asking me if I would induct Randy into the Hall of Fame in, I think it was Miami in 2012. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't really follow it that closely. So I said, well, thank you very much. However, it is Randy's wishes that he go into the Hall of Fame as a Popo family member, Randy, Lanny, and Angelo Popo. And that's the only way he wanted to do it. So that didn't get over. Nobody called me back and everything. So then I had an epiphany when I turned 59 years of age. Because you said I was the younger brother of the Macho Man, right?
Yeah.
And on my 59th birthday, I said to myself, I am now the older brother of the Macho Man, who was forever, he died at the age of 58 and a half, and I am 59 years old, and that's the only thing in my life I've ever done better than him. I lived to be 59. So I said to myself, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And that is a direct quote from Star Trek number 2. You remember?
Yes.
Okay, are you a Trekkie?
No, but I do know that.
Okay, so I'm not a Trekkie either, but I did know that. So I went home and I told my mom, I said, I am now the older brother and I am going to put him into the Hall of Fame. She said, you can't do that. That wasn't Randy's wishes. And I said, I already tried with John Laurinaitis. It didn't work. It didn't get over. I said, and I told her about all the times I didn't get my way because I was the youngest. Well, now I am the oldest. And I am going to make a lot of unpopular decisions now. And I said, let me explain to you why I'm doing it. Because on one hand, you have the Macho Man. On the other hand, you have millions of Macho fans. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. So Mark Carano called me up and asked me if I would come to New Orleans to get interviewed for the WWE Network. And I said, yes, I'll do that. But I want you to know something. I've changed my mind. I will now accept the fact that Randy is going into the Hall of Fame by himself. He says, oh my God, okay, we'll call you back. I'm going to tell everybody. So he calls me back in 30 minutes. And he says, okay, we only have one posthumous inductee per year into the Hall of Fame. And this year, it's going to be Paul Bearer. But if you can wait until San Jose in 2015, and please keep faith, don't tell anybody, we want to announce it, then Macho Man will be inducted into the Hall of Fame 1 year from now. I said, okay, great. And I didn't tell anybody except my mommy, and she didn't have a Twitter account, so everybody's fine. So anyway, I go there, I induct him, and let me ask you a question. Do you think I did the right thing?
I do. I do. I think you did the right thing. I mean, because Randy was a great wrestler, and he made a lot of people happy when he wrestled. And yes, I do think you did the right idea. I mean, the right thing to, not to have your whole family inducted, but to have your brother, exclusively into the WWF Hall of Fame. So.
Well, the thing is, they were mad at him for a few reasons, and some of the reasons are just I can't prove, and you can't prove. They're just rumors. But this is what I do know, that Randy wanted to end his career with a better match than he had with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. It really drove him crazy that no matter who he wrestled, he could never top that match. And of course, you know the reason. 50% of the reason that match was so great is because of the greatness of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and you can't have that match with everybody. But he was doing the commentary after Elizabeth left him, and he was just doing, the color commentary, doing a fantastic job, but getting increasingly bored with the job. And then he sees Shawn Michaels emerging as the greatest talent in the business. After he, ceased to become a tag team person and got into singles, he started noticing this is a guy that I can have a match with better than Steamboat, or as good or something. So he devised a 2-year program where, like the Hatfields and the McCoys, and, Randy was a stickler for detail. So he mapped out a 2-year thing ending in WrestleMania where it was going to be Shawn Michaels loses, he loses his hair. Randy loses, he loses his career and retires to the announcing table. And Randy was going to put him over right in the middle of the ring. So his final match of his life could be arguably better than the match he had with Steamboat. And Pat Patterson said, well, that's great, but we're having a youth movement, and the best thing you can do is stay in the microphone. So instead of beating the hell out of Pat Patterson and Jay Strongbow on the same day, which would have made him very happy, he did the adult thing and just called up WCW and got himself a contract with them. And then the next thing he did was he went to Raleigh, North Carolina, had a meeting with everybody, and got Slim Jim to uninvest with Vince McMahon and invest with Turner for the $750,000 a year. Now, Vince McMahon is a very great man and a very good man, but he is a Roman, and he likes to win them all. So he was not very happy about losing the sponsorship of Slim Jim. But the thing is, they liked Randy, and he made a very persuasive argument for them, and this is the reason they were very, very angry with Randy, and this is probably the reason that when my father died, when my brother died, and my mother died, I got condolences from everywhere in the world by email and by actual mail and by text. Everybody, gave me their condolences. Wrestling fans, wrestlers, different people, neighbors, friends, but nothing from Vince McMahon or his minions. Except for one guy, that would be Howard Finkel. That's the only guy, and I probably got him in trouble by saying that. But I'm telling you this because, yes, it did bother me that they can't even send a goddamn card for my brother, my mother, or my father. So I'm sure when I die, they're not even going to blink.
I'm just, are you surprised, with all this animosity towards your brother that they put him in the Hall of Fame? I mean, there's people that are that should be in the Hall of Fame that are not in the Hall of Fame because there's animosity between the families and Vince McMahon and his people. I mean, are you surprised that they wanted that, or do you think because he was probably the greatest intercontinental and wrestler that the WWF ever had? Is that why that they put him in the Hall of Fame?
I have no idea, but like I said, in 2012 I said no, and in 2014 I said yes, and in 2015 I accepted it. And the reason I did it, I didn't do it for Vince McMahon. I didn't do it for my brother. My brother enjoyed not being in the Hall of Fame because just like Pete Rose and Barry Bonds, they are more famous for not being in the Hall of Fame, in baseball's Hall of Fame, because of the steroids and the gambling. Okay. But Randy enjoyed not being in the Hall of Fame when it was ridiculous that he was overqualified for it, compared to the stars that are getting in there every year. But I felt that as the last man standing, and my mom died in 2017 at the age of 90, and although she wasn't happy that I did it, she understood why I did it, because it was the fans that made the Macho Man. The Macho fans gave Macho Man without demand there is no supply. Without the fans, our sport does not exist. Everything I have, everything I am, is because of the Macho fan. And even now on Cameo, I mean, people are asking for, happy birthday, Merry Christmas, whatever. And I thank Jim Hacksaw Duggan for smartening me up to this because, I like not leaving the house, and making a few bucks. So anyway, my point is, they let everybody else back in. I mean, Bruno Sammartino had legal problems with them, and they let him in. And by the time he got in to the Hall of Fame, most of his fans were already dead. So he should have done that back in the 70s or 80s. My God, the guy sold out Madison Square Garden 186 times, and then 187 on his final, Hall of Fame speech. So that's pretty good. So I thought that Bruno and Randy should have both been in long before. So anyway, that's my point. Not everybody's going to love you, but like for example, Pat Patterson. No, I'm not saying he wasn't a great worker. I'm not saying he wasn't a great booker. He was a very brilliant man, and he did a lot of great things for the WWE. However, when they have the 10 bell salute at his funeral, or they honor him in the ring and say what a great addition he was to the WWE, say thank you, Pat, for taking a match like Shawn Michaels versus Randy Savage and making sure the fans didn't get to see it. Might have been the greatest match in the world, might not have been, but didn't they deserve to try? And when you think about Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and the Montreal Screwjob, here's a man that wanted to lose, wanted to pass the torch, wanted to be unselfish, and they wouldn't let him. Naturally you can see that I'm still angry about this.
I mean, you can never tell. You can never tell. But in 2018, I mean, I was a big comic book fan back in the day. You released a comic, The Genius Lanny Poffo. I mean, tell me about that. I mean, that interests me, and that definitely interests a lot of people listening to the show right now.
Well, John Crowther is the man that contacted me, and we did a Kickstart campaign, and we raised more than enough money to get it off the ground. So we kept going, and I have to keep reordering because, for example, I believe I'm going to be in Keokuk, Iowa, on at the end of the last weekend of September. Keokuk, Iowa. I'm flying into Cedar Rapids and going to Keokuk, and where that is, you have to look it up. Okay. So anyway, and then so wherever I go, I bring the comic book, and the kids love it, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, with kids and video games and comic books. I know last year you started we're on a podcast. You started your own podcast. I mean, was that ever something that, I mean, you did it for a year, and it's, you've retired that podcast. I mean, was it something that you loved doing? I mean, you interviewed such legends, how did that go?
Okay, I did 20 episodes, and the reason I had to quit is because it was too much work. I am retired. I've been retired for 15 years, and I'm on a lazy streak right now, and it was like getting to be too time consuming. JP Zarka did a fantastic job, but he was a little bit of a perfectionist. And I just like to just mail it in, and he wanted to make it fantastic, and he did. But I was just getting to the point where it was too much work for me.
Oh, I mean, I can definitely totally understand that. And kind of to wrap it up today, we're of course talking to the genius Lanny Poffo here on the Retro Wrestling Rewind. If people want to get in contact with you through social media, heck, even through your Cameo, how can they do that? I mean, of course, everything's going to be at the bottom in the show notes, but if people don't have a pen or they can't read because, I mean, they're a professional wrestling fan, how can they get in touch with you through social media and Cameo?
Okay, whatever you do, do not write me a letter to my address because I take those and I don't respond to them. Okay, because I don't want people bothering me at home. Okay, I want you to bother me. Go through geniuslannypoffo.com, and there's a contact thing, and bother me through that. Also, I'm on Twitter, and you'll put the link up. And I'm on Facebook, two accounts on Facebook, one personal, one business, and I take them both as business. Just Lanny Poffo and Lanny the Genius Poffo. You'll put them up. So I'm very easy to get a hold of. Very easy to meet for, bookings and public appearances and stuff. And I still like going places and doing things. And I don't accept every offer that I get, but if the price is right, I'll be there tonight.
Hey, I mean, everybody's got a price, I guess. And
for the $1 Million Man.
Yes, they do. Lanny, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you said you're on a lazy streak, but hey, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule and coming on the program.
before we hang up, I just want to say that you're going to be interviewing Wildfire Tommy Rich. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. My brother loved working with him in Atlanta, and he was very pleased when Tommy Rich became a great star. And you know, Tommy Rich, his name Wildfire, that's legitimate, because when you buy a ticket to see Tommy Rich, you get a wildfire. And you tell him that I think that he's one of the all-time greats, and more importantly, Randy did too.
To my left, ladies and gentlemen, one of the all-time great sports attractions. To my left, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and it's most unusual that we're here in an empty arena, because Dusty Rhodes fills arenas, because people flock from literally all over the world to see this man bring his type of excitement, to see him bring his type of professional wrestling to the squared circle. However, it was not always like that with people flocking to see you, was it, Dusty Rhodes? Things have been rough. It's been a long, hard road.
Yeah, Vinny, you know, well, this is a good chance. You know, it's always a little yelling, a little screaming, a little really get down fever and boogie when I'm rapping, and never get a chance to sit down and rap with my people and talk to you. When I was a kid growing up, I did have a dream. You know, I look around this building, I look around at the things that go on in this building, the people screaming and hollering, and it's a quiet time for me. It's a personal time for me, because my dream is every little child's dream, or every person's dream that ever wanted to be anything. It is an American dream. There is an American dream. Hell, whether it's filling a building like this, or if it's doing plumbing like my daddy did, as well as you can do it. You understand? I mean, just as good as you can. I just thank God that there are people like yourself come out to see the American dream, because when I was growing up, I sure didn't think 265 pounds of blue-eyed soul would captivate a country like I have. The people drive me. There's never been a man, I don't think, in sports anywhere gets a natural high. That might be it. You look around at a natural high from doing what he's doing. It's not dope. It's not pot. It's not whiskey and wine. I drink a little whiskey and wine. But it's every man, woman, or child that really believe in the American dream. And this building, you know, Vinny, this building, I'm getting down now because I'm seeing things in my heart. This building will be full, it's true. They'll be screaming and hollering and jumping and shucking and jiving, because this man knows no color barrier. He has no qualms about going out and eating dinner with a black man or Puerto Rican or a Greek man or a Chinese man or Mexican American or anybody like that. Because I was raised to understand a man is a man first. When he proves himself a man, no matter what color he is, no matter what creed he is. Playing football, you know, back in West Texas, we had many black guys on the team, really boogie get down fever boys. And there were a few people around the town there in Texas that were still down a little bit on blacks. And now the world's changed. The arenas have changed. You can look up in this building in a matter of few hours when it's full, and you can see a black man and a white man eating out of the same popcorn box. Woo! That's funky. That's the American dream. And I don't care too much for politicians, you understand, or don't get involved with what's their business. All I know is my business is making you happy. And I get a little sentimental when I'm thinking about it, because making you happy makes my dream fulfill. And God knows I love you. Now, whether it's superstar Billy Graham or Bob Backlund, the great champion that he is, or whether it's sitting here with Vince, or whether it's Freddie Blassie or Captain Lou Albino or the Weasel, or any of his people, or Spiros Arion, there is a triumph in an empty building. When I can sit here and really let my feelings go, telling you in 2 hours, that will be full of screaming people for one thing, for one instant in their life. Everything else don't matter but the American dream. Now, whether I carry that banner like I should, sometimes it takes help from you. But I tell you one damn thing, I'm gonna carry it forever and ever. The American dream lives in this empty building.
Here is the American dream, Dusty Rhodes. And Dusty, your fans welcome you back, man.
First of all, I would like to thank the many, many fans throughout this country that wrote cards and letters to Dusty Rhodes, the American dream, while I was down. Secondly, I want to thank Jim Crockett Promotions for waiting and taking the time, because I know how important it was. Starcade 85, it is to the wrestling fans, it is to Jim Crockett Promotions. And Dusty Rhodes, the American dream, with that weight, got what I wanted. Ric Flair, the world's heavyweight champion. I don't have to say a lot more about the way I feel about Ric Flair. No respect, no honor. There is no honor among thieves in the first place. He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family. You don't know what hard times are, Daddy. Hard times are when the textile workers around this country are out of work and got 4 or 5 kids and can't pay their wages, can't buy their food. Hard times are when the auto workers are out of work and they tell them go home. And hard times are when a man has worked at a job 30 years. 30 years. They give him a watch, kick him in the butt, and say, hey, a computer took your place, Daddy. That's hard time. That's hard time. And Ric Flair, you put hard times on this country by taking Dusty Rhodes out. That's hard time. And we all had hard times together. I admit I don't look like the athlete of the day supposed to look. My belly's just a little big. My hind is just a little big. But brother, I am bad and they know I'm bad. And there were 2 bad people. One was John Wayne and he's dead, brother. And the other one's right here. Nature Boy Ric Flair. The world's heavyweight title belongs to these people. I'm gonna reach out right now. I want you at home to know my hand is touching your hand for this gathering of the biggest body of people in this country, in this universe, all over the world now, reaching out because the love that was given me, and this time I will repay you now, because I will be the next world's heavyweight champion on this hard time blues. Dusty Rhodes Tour 85 and Ric Flair, Nature Boy. Let me leave you with this. One way to hurt Ric Flair is to take what he cherishes more than anything in the world. That's the world's heavyweight title. I'm gonna take it. I've been there twice. This time when I take it, Daddy, I'm gonna take it for you. Let's gather for it. Don't let me down now, because I came back for you, for that man up there that died 10, 12 years ago and never got the opportunity to see a real Wolf champion. And I'm proud of you, and thank God I have you. And I love you. Love you!
38 pounds in the black corner. From St. Louis,
Mr. Crow.
Andre the Giant.
Gonna get his legs set on the bruiser.
Number 1, the greatest WWE champion of all time, and in many ways, the man who made the title what it is today, Bruno Sammartino.
his opponent weighing 236 pounds in the white corner. From Van Nuys, California.
Quand même à aimer. Oui, je suis